Part 2. Assimilation. Chapter 5. Gaining the third point of view. In the first part we observed how to listen and how to see and notice every single thing that is happening all around us at any given moment, and the fact that that is all brand new, the fact that it hasn't happened before and it will never happen ever again. So if we aren't aware of the situation and we aren't observant of our surroundings, we will miss 90% of the things which are happening around us. And certainly if we are trapped in our own world, in our ideal world, then we may fail to notice the real world and all the opportunities the real world may present to us. We saw how every moment is an opportunity to learn something brand new for the very first time, and the more we learn from our teachers, from our parents, from our peers, from the people that we live with to the people that we work with, and all our friends and family and acquaintances, from books, the media, from art, TV, movies, the internet, and all the other venues we can choose to learn from, that will certainly give us a much wider knowledge base on which to base our facts. This in turn will give us an informed view, not just our view, not just the way that we choose to see things, but a broader view, a more thoughtful view of the environment, and that will help in our everyday situations and those conversations too. In this part we will take a look at how to assimilate all those individual bits of knowledge that we've managed to accumulate from all those individual different sources through our sense fields and through our experiences in life. Assimilation simply means being able to put things together into a logical order so that we can use those as tools to help us work through any given situation. And it's important to assimilate things so that they make sense, first of all. It's important to assimilate things so that the things which don't make sense are still on the table and they aren't rejected out of hand, because even the things which don't make sense to us at the moment could still be used to make more sense of things later on. So it's important to have everything on the table, and that includes every view, every tool at our disposal in every given situation. Sometimes it isn't possible to gain every view of every given situation, but certainly it is usually possible to get three sides to any given story, and that is your side, their side, and a third person's point of view. So for example, if you are having an argument as to who reached the South Pole first, and someone says it was Captain Scott and someone says it was Amundsen, and then you look in a book and you gain the correct answer, which was Amundsen, that's the third point of view, and in that case the third point of view was correct. If you're having any kind of argument with any kind of third person in the room, you can usually get a third point of view. If you have an argument with a child, then you can talk it over with the father or another sibling or a friend of the child to get a third point of view on the situation. Or a school teacher maybe, if you are having difficulties with that child, or perhaps grandparents, grandmothers may give you a third opportunity to appreciate that child, because sometimes that child will certainly be different in different situations and different circumstances in front of different people. And so if you think that child is reckless with their toys and they tend to play around too much and they don't listen, then you might want to interview a school teacher, and they might say, well, actually he or she really does listen in class, and they really do have their eyes and their ears wide open, and they really are absorbing the world, so you have nothing to fear. But speaking to the child, you might not get that information. Speaking to the father, you might not get that information, and even if you question their friends about it, then they might not be interested in school. So in that scenario we gained 4 or 5 different viewpoints to finally get to the real answer, which was yes, the child does learn in certain situations and the child is growing up. Sometimes it's worth asking and talking and to get to the bottom of the situation, because if you don't ask, then you don't find out, and if you don't ask, you don't get. So there's no harm in asking, and certainly asking is a big part in the philosopher's life, because they always have a lot of questions to answer, and so the answers aren't always easily or readily available. So asking from all sources, big or small, immaterial or trivial, asking is certainly one way to open yourself up to receiving the answers to your questions. Chapter 6. Contemplation. The next step in the assimilation process is to consider contemplation. Contemplation is a matter of arranging things in the mind so that they make sense and so that they follow a logical pattern. To contemplate on something can really open up the possibilities of the past and the future. So, how often do you actually get the chance to assimilate and contemplate matters in your life? Usually, most people don't get the chance. They wake up with the alarm and they get on with making themselves a meal and going out to work, coming back from work, maybe seeking late night entertainment, and then returning home, viewing the TV and returning to bed. Some people choose to spend the early hours of the day thinking about the previous day and to think about the day to come. Some people choose to think about all those things at night, in bed, just before they switch out the light, or maybe even in the dark as they await their sleep. Some people may choose to use that time constructively to contemplate what they have done, what they have managed to achieve during that day. And everybody always manages to achieve something during that day, no matter how trivial, no matter how small, and those small achievements can be counted in the late evening or at night, and you can be thankful that you managed to achieve all those things. You didn't manage to achieve any more than that, unfortunately, but at least you managed to achieve what you did manage to achieve, and that is enough. Contemplative time is all important, particularly when you are thinking about something really major in your life, maybe relationship problems, or problems you might be facing at work, or directions that you want to think about in life. What does your life mean? Where do you fit into all this? And it's certainly important to reflect on all those things, to put your life into some kind of perspective, and then that helps to give you a balanced point of view and a balanced mind and an open mind, which you can use during the day to aid you during life. Let's take a look at assimilation taken to a higher level, taken to a more regular degree, and that is the realm of worrying. And sometimes it's easy to think about things for too long and to make things make more sense than they actually do, and certainly to add things to a story in your mind, which makes things rather generally less pleasant than it would have been on the surface. So you think and think and think, and you worry and you draw conclusions. So that kind of assimilation is a danger. It's certainly a trap for the philosopher, because assimilating the wrong thing and coming to the wrong conclusions, there really is nothing worse for the philosopher, because, as I said, there is usually always someone in the room that says, actually, you're talking rubbish, and they'll make you feel small and make you feel like you don't know what you're talking about. So it's always important to know what you are talking about. And sometimes I've known people that worry and turn things into things bigger than they really are, and they turn those into complaints about life. I think about one person in particular where nothing ever came easy for this person, but at the same time everything which seems to happen to this person is to the negative, and they seem to be actually looking and listening and turning their attention into finding faults in life. So lo and behold, those faults appear. Whatever you are looking for in life and listening out for, whatever you want to find in life, you'll find it. So if you find faults in life, you'll find them. Even in a perfect situation, there'll always be some potential fly in the ointment. So when we took this person out for day trips, this person, even though the sun was shining and the weather was warm, this person would complain that it would soon get cold and it would soon rain and it would soon do this and that, and she would materialize things which never actually happened. She would use her illusion of life to perpetuate her misery, and certainly people who live through a state of constant assimilation and contemplation and constantly draw extraneous conclusions live in a state of paranoia and perpetual fear of things which may never happen, but which they think might happen at any point. So the paranoia factor, these constructed antagonisms, these deluded perceptions about life, can end up turning into your own manufactured misery and your own perpetual torment in life. And certainly if you want to materialise your own ball and chain and drag that around with you day after day after day, then you can certainly do that. You can certainly think about things in the past and to drag the past around with you day after day, bringing that back into the moment, or not. You can choose to think about the future and to create a ball and chain for yourself in the future, and you can imagine this and that, and you can drag that into the present, and well, you can do that if you want to do that. And we will return to this aspect in part 5 of this development course. Chapter 7. Judgements. Everyone has judgments. Everyone makes judgments. And it's those judgments which can be the problem. It's not the fact that we judge, it's sometimes the fact that we don't need to judge, and our body will judge automatically, and our mind will judge automatically things that it sees and hears all the time on our behalf. You can judge things to be perfectly fair in life, and you can judge things to be perfectly wrong in life. If you don't open your mouth about it, then there is no problem. If you do open your mouth about it, then sometimes there can be a problem, because a present judgment can be setting yourself up for future misery, particularly because judging other people actually opens ourselves and makes ourselves available to be judged in return. And so it's looking at those judgments. Now that your eyes and your ears are open to the moment, you will find you will judge many more things than you used to judge. You'll see people and you will judge those people walking by and judge situations walking by, and you will do that simply because of the fact that you are noticing these things maybe for the first time. So this is the opportunity to notice those judgments and to use the contemplation, the assimilation process, to strip out those judgments and to blank the mind of those judgments, the ones that you think are unnecessary to your life. And there's nothing we need to do about those judgments. We can view them as they enter our minds and watch those arise and fall at our leisure. We don't need to follow up on those judgments. Just because the girl has long hair doesn't mean to say she's young. And sometimes when you get in front of the person walking along the street, you find that it is quite a much older lady who happens to have long hair, and they are not beautiful princesses at all. So our judgments can be wrong. Our impressions of the future can be wrong. And even our impressions of the past can be wrong, as we'll see in later chapters. But it's what we make of those judgments that is the important thing. And if we judge other people, then that, taken to the extreme, may lead to what's known as gossip. Now, gossip is judging other people and talking to other people about that. And we might be right, or we might be wrong. If a situation comes into your life where your best friend has a new partner, and they are getting to know each other, and you judge that to be a bad thing, and you go around telling all your friends and their friends that that is a bad thing, then they aren't going to be in a particularly receptive mood about you, and they may break off your friendship because of those judgments. And similarly, if you suspect something is going on and you use those judgments to spread rumours about people which may or may not be true, and those rumours get back to those people, then again they will not appreciate your judgments, and they may argue that that is not the case, and how do you make those accusations and works against their character. Wouldn't it have been much easier if you had kept those judgments to yourself? And so it isn't the fact that we have those judgments, everybody does. It's what we make of those judgments that is the important thing. It's knowing when to speak and when not to speak, given any situation. And as we have seen already, apart from gossip, but complaining as well about any given situation isn't always healthy. In fact, complaining, I realised, was a complete and utter waste of my time and energy. So I don't waste time or energy complaining or even assimilating those contemplations and to judge those things into a negative state, because that again is a waste of my mind, it is a waste of my time, it is a waste of my energy, and I could be thinking and observing many different things rather than to descend into judgments. And at some point a philosopher might realise that judgments and gossip are actually beneath them as moral human beings, and they don't really need to do that in order to get by, and in fact doing that makes life more difficult, and everybody likes things easier. So only talk about the things that you know what to talk about, and only talk about the things that you have enough knowledge of to be able to maintain a stance and to back up that knowledge, because if you don't, then people will catch you out, and if you are the fool, you will certainly be acknowledged as the fool, and people will stop taking you as seriously as they did before. So to get by in life, it really is all about what you say and how you say it. It really isn't a matter of what you know, it's certainly a matter of how well you can define that and relate that and convey that, and also how open you are to receiving new information. Because let's just remind ourselves again, whilst we are speaking, we are not necessarily listening and observing the other people. We are in our own world, and so we might not always be open to the thoughts and the ideas of those around us. It's also important to consider how much your words would affect any given situation at any given point, because sometimes it's worth saying things and pointing things out, and sometimes it is not. A philosopher also has to bear in mind that sometimes if you tell someone the truth, that might not always be the best thing for them to hear, that might not always be appreciated for them to hear, and you might also be rejected for judging those people and for spreading your opinions about those people. So telling the truth is a core principle in any philosopher's life. There's certainly nothing to be gained in life by exaggeration. That just makes you go back into ego, and ego is certainly not where a philosopher wants to be. So if you can't get by telling the truth, again, keep that mouth closed. There's no point in exaggeration. But sometimes telling the truth can do more harm than good, and sometimes people have to learn the hard way by experiencing their own life. Sometimes you might be able to see something happening in another person's life. You might even be able to foresee things happening in their future. Is it wise to tell them those things that you perceive, those judgments, in case that does happen and your friend can avoid those things in the future? Or is it better to keep your mouth closed and to wait and see, and to let that person live their life and to go through that experience and to learn the hard way? Sometimes learning the hard way is the best way, and sometimes if you tell a person about something which may happen in their future and they take steps to avoid it, then you basically rob them of that learning experience. You remove that learning experience from their future, and they may go on and make those mistakes again and again, having not learnt that experience the first time around. So saving someone from hardship may sound ideal on the surface, but when there is a learning experience to be experienced, then if you handle everything for that person, then you take away that potential of that learning experience. So sometimes telling people for their own good isn't actually always for their own good, and sometimes telling people about events that you perceive in the future might just actually jeopardize the learning process of them actually gaining insight from that in the future, and that could have been a tremendous life opportunity for them. So it's up to the philosopher whether you help them through that life opportunity and guide them to the door and they'll walk through it themselves, whether you show them the exit door around the corner and avoid that opportunity altogether, or even whether you open the door of opportunity and push them through it, because you can't always predict how people will react, and sometimes challenging a person, pointing things out, having judgments, gossip, sometimes a person will react openly and say, "That's great, I'm glad you told me about that," and sometimes they will say, "I'm actually not glad you told me about that, and that is not what I wanted to hear." So to a certain degree, when we are talking about judgments, how much does another person or the people around us have to know about all that? To put it another way, how much do other people care about all that? Because they are in their world, and they have their friends and their family and their work colleagues and their life, and you are in your world with your friends and your colleagues and your workmates and your life. And even if you are working in the same building, you are living completely separate lives. And even if you are father and daughter, or you are partners, or you are mother and child, it doesn't matter, because their life is their life, and their world is their world, and your life is your life, and your world is your world. And as we have seen, you can't expect others to fit in with our life and our world, and they might disrespect your life and your world and your views should you interfere. So how much do you interfere with other people's lives? How much of other people's lives do they care to know about you? Certainly I know of one friend who has troubles in life and likes to bring up the past and to look at the past in a negative way, and he lets the past impact the present. I can't walk a mile in his shoes, so I can't do anything to physically solve his situation, but it also compounds his problems and makes him feel bad. And it not only puts his problems on the table, but it makes his problems clear to him to see, and he can go over his problems and make them very clear to himself and to other people, but those problems still remain on the table. There is nothing you can do about anybody's life. There is nothing you can really do about someone's flat tire on the motorway, if that's what they've suffered, and sometimes you can't do anything about it. So on one level it's good to talk about things if you are clearing the air, and to say things which are better out than in. But how much do you really want to offload onto other people and make them feel bad about things that they might not even have any say about, or have any interest about, or have any sway over one way or another? You may complain to your friends and your colleagues and your partners and your children about all kinds of things which are nothing to do with them, and are just things that are happening in your life, and you feel like you want to tell somebody. Well, that's fine, but sometimes it gets to a point where people are fed up of listening to a story if it goes on for too long, and they feel like that you are dwelling in your own misery, and it gets back into the perpetual torment bit. And if you don't notice that you are masterminding misery above and beyond the fact, then the other people might notice it, and they might tell you about the fact, and that might make you feel worse. Or they might not even notice it, and you might feel like you've been wasting your time. If the person you are talking to already has a busy life of their own and problems of their own, then the person might not even care about your problems, and might be uncomfortable listening to your problems, knowing that they are keen to talk about their problems. And while they are listening to you, then they certainly aren't speaking about their own problems. And it can be the fact that a perpetual complainer can take up lots and lots of valuable time in a conversation, when the other person has to hold on to the fact that they have things to say, and they feel neglected in the conversation, and that the other person is not listening and basically thinking to themselves, poor me, and poor my life, and dwelling in that misery. Because if it reaches that stage, then you might feel that they are draining your energy, and you might both come out of the entire conversation feeling drained and having not gotten very further with it. So while you are speaking about your stuff, how much do you really want to get to the point and get to the bottom of the situation, and to get that off your chest and to clear that up? And how much are you wallowing in your own misery? And if you are keen and open with your senses and you are listening to yourself, because while we are speaking we are also listening to ourselves speaking, if you are aware and mindful of yourself in that situation, then you may be able to stop yourself from going over the edge, becoming boring, and to save yourself from wallowing in that misery and taking that forward into another day. Chapter 8. If at first you don't succeed, take a break. Now that we are reaching the end of this part on assimilation and the contemplation process, it's important to also consider at the end of the day that you do have that opportunity every day to think about things and to put things in some kind of perspective, to plan to do things or to arrange things in some kind of an order, or even to just appreciate the day that you have been through. Sleeping on a problem is certainly one thing that I shall recommend and is an aid to all philosophers, because sometimes a philosopher realises a problem cannot be solved straight away or instantly. It might take a few days or even a few months to sort out a solution to a problem, but sleeping on the problem certainly helps, because it means you come back to a problem afresh the day after, and it means you can have fresher ideas and you are more open to new ideas regarding any given situation. Even if you can't sleep on a problem, still the miracle of taking a break is another thing which I'll recommend. Just taking a break from the problem, grabbing a coffee, grabbing something to eat, taking a cigarette, walking outside, doing something else for 10 minutes, going for a meal, coming back to a problem the day after. But taking a break from a problem is certainly an aid to the philosopher, because sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees, and sometimes if you are right on top of a situation, then it is too big to handle all in one go, and you might need to step back, step away from that situation and observe the situation from a distance. And as we saw in part 1, stepping away, just taking that step back and observing things and seeing things and listening to things from a distance is the standpoint that philosophers enjoy, because from the outside looking in is certainly the best place to observe not only yourself but observing your environment as well. So I'd encourage observance in life, and to be the observer and to stand back and to assimilate things and to work things out in your mind and to put things on shelves for when you need them later. Don't throw things out, but don't be too quick to judge, and don't be too quick to say things in the negative either, because sometimes those things won't work in your life and they won't make your life easy. By the same token, don't bottle things up either. So sometimes contemplation and assimilation and talking things out can help to put things in a more reasonable order, so that you can work through things, work through any given situation without fear and without things building up in the background.